Hello and welcome to What Goes Around. My name is Deb Grant.
And my name is Eamon Murtaugh.
And on this week's show we have Marshall Chess. I was intending to do a very short interview about his new release, and instead we chatted for nearly an hour, and he was a fountain of amazing musical information. So you're going to love this interview. It's one of my favourites we've done.
And we have a feature with DJ Greg Belson about the wonderful world of gospel music.
And before all that, of course, we're going to talk. And this week we talk about Deb and filing records. Again, I know, but we're obsessed with records. It just happens that way. And of course, we will be talking about my new project, which is lovewillsavetheday.fm, a brilliant new community-focused radio station.
DJ Deb Grant, please inform me what is going around in your world.
Well, there's been a big change in my life. Obviously, I moved house a couple of months ago, as we discussed. And before I moved house, my record shelves, they looked quite neat and tidy. But the filing system, I mean, there was no filing system, basically. There had once been a vague system of filing in terms, I know we're, you know,
I'm shaking. Can you hear me shake my head?
It's especially shameful because, as you know, my sister has a PhD in archiving. Actually, came on this show.
We've done a show about this. Exactly.
Talking about the best way to file records.
We've actually done this, and you've got to tell me. Have you tackled the mess of records now?
Well, previously, at one point, far earlier in my life, they were arranged in terms, kind of vaguely in terms of genre and alphabetically. But you know how that's not ideal. Certain genres bleed into other genres, and you just end up with, more questions than the system answers, really. So then it was like there'd be certain regular gigs I had where I'd be taking certain records, and so the records I would bring to those gigs would end up sort of bunched together. But inevitably, I would never be able to find, if I was looking for something specific, forget about it. I was just never able to find anything. So one of the things, lovely Campbell, who helped me move and came over from New Zealand, obviously he just had a tourist visa, so he wasn't able to work. So I put him to work, or rather he volunteered to file my records, because he was even more horrified than you are at the fact that they were just in a massive jumble.
Good man. This is the sort of influence you need on your life.
I know, although, I mean, not only did he alphabetize my records, he also catalogued all of them on Discogs and separated a bunch of stuff out to sell.
Oh, that's work. That's a lot of work.
I know. I had to buy him dinner.
Quite right too. Do you know, I did that. So when I started with Discogs, it was actually, I was living in Portsmouth and I started putting them all in. And I started with kind of the ravey bits, and then I did some other bits. It was kind of, I was hit and missing, but I was just putting stuff in. And then I moved, and of course all the records moved around when I moved. And then I didn't know what I'd put in and what I hadn't. So I spent this absolutely maddening period of a few months, like typing in the name of the thing or the serial number, hitting the thing, and then it would pop up, and I go, and I go to press it, and I've already entered that one. Okay, so, you know, and then because they were all mixed up, you know, like you'd have 3 that are in there, 2 that weren't, 1 that was in there, 4 that weren't, you know, and it was, it took years.
It's such a task. And like, I would come home after work and Campbell would just be like sitting surrounded by records, like on the sofa, just records
like your
everywhere.
Dream guy.
Yeah, I know, literally. Sometimes shirtless. It was pretty amazing. But yeah, he managed to get them all alphabetized and on Discogs before he left. And he had such stern words with me as he was leaving. He was like, "You have to keep up this filing system. Like, what can we do to make sure that you keep this up? Because if you ruin my filing system, I'm going to be really, really annoyed." But it's just like, it's the Discogs cataloguing and the alphabetizing. It's like, I don't trust myself, because you have everything filed in terms of genre, right? But this means, Eamon, that you have to get your records out for a gig, put them in your bag, and then file them all away perfectly, right, when you get back. I just can't see myself doing that.
No, you see, I quite enjoy it because I used to work in a record shop for a long time, and there was a lot of filing involved there. And I quite like now. I get kind of zen about it. So the records are in the bags, and then I kind of just dump them down when I come home, and then Sunday morning, put something nice on, pull out the tunes and just slowly over the course of a couple hours, just pop them all away and have a little think about, and just play the ones that you fancy as you're putting them out. It's quite a nice chill thing. And at the end, you've got this beautiful floor space in front of you, and all your records are where they should be.
Yeah,
but I really recommend that. I mean, you've got it now, but the Discogs things is so handy.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times I've been in a record shop thinking, have I got that one?
Oh my God, yeah. That actually happened to me very recently. I was very excitedly ordered a copy of the first Disco Not Disco compilation because I knew I had volume 2 because I bought it when I was like 14 or something, and I thought I didn't have volume 1, and then as I got the notification that it was winging its way to me, Campbell discovered volume 1 in my records. There it was. A couple of times. So yes, it will be handy, but it's just like, this may surprise you, Eamon, but I'm not a very patient person.
Well, that is an listen, I think in a way you've got to look at it this way, that it's gonna save you time and effort, right? Because the amount of time you were scurrying around desperately trying to find something when you needed it.
Yeah.
As opposed to now, there's no time pressure on filing them away, really. You can just get it done by the end of the day or whatever.
I suppose that's true, but I like a tidy house. What do you do about compilations? Do you have a various section under each genre?
That is the stupidest idea. I'm sure I've mentioned this when we talked about that, but people who file all compilations together, that makes no sense.
So that's because this is what we've been trying to figure out. Can we put things under name of compilation or of DJ or whatever? But I don't know.
Well, because my collection has like your A to Z, which is your standard music, your Beatles, your Stones, whatever, and then most of it's by genre. So what I do is I have compilations of a genre in it. So I've got a massive pile of disco compilations. For example, and a load of like funk and soul compilations. They live with the funk and soul of the disco at the end, all squished up together. But I know someone who files any compilation in the same place as any other compilation. So you might have a heavy metal compilation next to a trip hop compilation, and that, my friends, is a war crime.
That's outrageous.
Yeah. Yeah, no, compilations are tricky, and if I was filing them in, I probably would go under the title, because let's face it, if you put under various, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
That will just be a mess.
Yeah.
So I would do it under the title if I'm going to put them into the A to Z, I would. But I normally, because with DJ stuff, you want access quickly, so whatever I'm playing, if I have a comp, it'll be in that general area.
Yeah. This is good intel. I'll pass it on to Campbell.
Yeah, well, tell him he's
for when he comes back to maintain.
I think he's going to be a fine influence on you.
Yes, I hope so. I mean, the threat of how furious he'll be if I don't keep up his filing. He won't even be furious. I think he'll just be genuinely heartbroken because it's been his life's work for the past 3 months. Yeah, he's really.
Oh, keep him busy when he comes back.
Well, yeah, exactly. He's got to have something to do. God knows. Eamon Murda, what goes around?
Well, you're not the only radio mogul on the airwaves nowadays, because I'm delighted to say I am part of a brand new radio station.
Oh, congratulations. Always said you're good on the radio.
There you go, you see. Yeah. I get top tips from a pro. Now, you remember the Love Will Save the Day mailing list?
I do.
With lovely Jed Hallam. He basically started this mailing list. Basically, he was just doing playlists and he wanted to share the music. So he started to share them around, and then he's quite good at them. So lots of people started joining in. And I think I met him, he just came out of the blue one day and said, "Do you want to do a playlist?" And I was like, "Who are you?" Huh? But we've been firm friends ever since. And this mailing list here just grew and grew and grew and grew. Thousands and thousands of people started following it. And now he's decided, with the rest of the posse, and there is quite a considerable posse now, to start a radio station called lovewillsavetheday.fm.
Yes, amazing. Jed is just one of the most pure of heart people. He is anytime anything good happens for him or to him, it just warms my heart. He's such a lovely man.
Yeah, well, it's been really good, and it's been a real team effort as well. There's been loads of people involved, like getting it all together. Yeah. They're kind of broadcasting just weekends for now, so it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. and the quality of the selectors, because this whole mailing list, it was like a WhatsApp group as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's people are just offering, you know, their advice and recommendations, and the recommendations, because all of these people are absolute music nuts. The recommendations are off the charts good.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for a couple of years now, I've been scraping little bits off this and, you know, finding certain records that way. And now they've all got radio shows around me, and it's a joy. Like, so much good stuff.
So what's the vibe of your radio show? Has it got a theme, or is it just stuff that you like?
Well, I'm really enjoying myself, I have to say, because I've split it into two. So I've got my usual Black Wax Solution radio show, which is basically funk, soul, and disco. But what I've realised, I had a funny conversation with someone about Northern Soul and old funk and things like that. And what they were saying was, like, you know, there's so much value put on the old stuff. Do you know what I mean? There's so much value put on old soul. In fact, for many people, the older the better, and the more obscure the better. You know, the least well known the better. And that's quite an interesting thing when you think about it. And then a couple of days later, I was DJing at home for fun, just old records from the 90s, electronic stuff, electro and techno. And I thought, why isn't there a machine Northern Soul? Do you know? Because techno and electro is so future facing all the time that you never, you know, records are old a week after they've been released. Do you know what I mean? And no one ever seems to go back and really look at the archive. And I was looking up at my shelves, and I've got, like, you know, 35 years of electronic music of various genres up there, most of which won't ever get played out. Do you know what I mean? Because A, those times have gone, B, I'm not playing in those sort of clubs, and C, kids probably want to listen to Drake. But I just thought, what I'm going to do is my second one, it's called the Electronic Workshop. It's going to be on Sunday evenings, and I'm just going to go through old electronica, like electronica, ambient, techno, electro, weird stuff. It's basically an electronic weirdo show.
Are you talking my language?
I knew you'd appreciate that. I knew you would, because you're big on weirdos.
Yeah, weird shit is my vibe. That sounds amazing. What a great idea.
No, it's really nice. So, and you know, I'm thinking now maybe I will try and get a little club night out of it as well, because it'd be lovely to hear some of these out loud.
Yeah, I mean, it's made for dancing, right? Most of it.
Exactly. And a lot of it dates extraordinarily well. I kind of thought maybe doing a whole show of, you know, retro electro would be, you know, you'd start to see where the rings on the tree had been formed. Do you know what I mean? And some of that is true. Some of it does date. Obviously, the rave stuff sounds ravey and whatnot. But, you know, a lot of it just sounds amazing still. And in fact, especially the stuff from Detroit could have been made yesterday. Maybe it's made 30 years ago. It's really hard to tell, because it's very idiosyncratic and very heartfelt machine soul. Yeah. So, yeah. So all I need now is a load of robots, and I'll be happy.
Well, you know, you could, I mean, Siri was kind of interrupting our conversation at the beginning there. Maybe you could
see. They're keen. They're keen.
Yeah,
to get involved.
exactly. Obviously, he knew something I didn't. But yeah, that's very exciting. Congratulations. So when does it start?
Well, it started. We're doing a soft launch. So we soft launched last weekend, and basically, you know, we're not kind of making a big deal about it because there's a lot of technical stuff, and this is very much a community focused radio station, right? So it's run by a group of people who love records to the extent that they will spend hours of their free time making shows and putting them up. This isn't some smooth operation, you know, with megabucks behind it.
Sure.
So we're kind of learning as we go, and there's a few technical hitches here and there. It's getting creaky, but we're kind of ironing them out, and I imagine in about 2 weeks' time, so easily by the time this comes out, we'll be broadcasting every weekend, and the quality has been insanely high. All kinds of music, from super chill out Sunday mornings to like banging garage and amapiano on Friday nights.
This sounds great. I can't wait to tune in, and it's good, Eamon, because I don't work Friday nights.
Hey,
so you know, my loyalty can wander elsewhere.
There you go. We got you covered. Keep it locked, as they say in the pirate stations.
Now, to me, Greg Belson represents the very best of DJing culture, a man who's done more digging than a JCB. Greg has become one of the country's leading experts on gospel music. Through his Divine Chord radio show and countless compilations, he has become the very best kind of musical evangelist. It's a real pleasure to welcome Greg to What Goes Around to tell us why spiritual music matters. DJ Greg Belson, please, make me believe in gospel. How are you?
Well, I'm very good, thank you, sir. And thank you for that resounding welcome. Thank you. Thank you, indeed. Thank you. Thank you. And one more time, thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. Listen, I have had so much pleasure out of your work over the last few years. I mean, you have been digging gospel now for how many years?
Actually, I looked this up recently. It was 1993 was the very first gospel record that I bought.
Wow.
So yeah, it was. So that's this year celebrates 30 years in the game,
Wow.
which is kind of a little bit mind blowing, really. Yeah, 1993, first record I purchased, knowing that it was a gospel record, was actually The Lovers of God on the Shatinga record label. But the first record I actually bought, not realising it was a gospel record, was Clarence Smith, Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child.
Oh yes, what a great record.
And just a fantastic record. Had absolutely no idea that Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child is a gospel evergreen, it's a standard. And at the time I just heard this amazing track played by my learned friend DJ Snowboy.
Yeah, well he's got a few records.
Yes, and he's got an amazing ear for great music. Yeah. And when I heard him play that at a club night I was running with DJ Vadim, I had to own that record. Like I say, didn't realise it was a gospel record at the time until I got the record in the post and noticed the label, which said Gospel Truth.
I guess the first question that always pops into whenever I say, I'm into gospel and I really love gospel and I show people my gospel collection or whatever, which is small but perfectly formed. The first thing they always say, are you very religious? So I suppose I'd better ask you, are you very religious? Is this the calling?
No, not at all. I don't feel, I'm not a religious person per se, and I do get asked that question quite a lot. Some people don't understand that mindset in a way. Some people have said that if I'm not religious, then I must be missing something within the music. I disagree with that. I'm just because I don't necessarily believe in the message of generic gospel doesn't mean to say I can't enjoy the music. And ultimately for me, gospel music is about the condition of the world that we are in and us as a people. It's about positive messages and sometimes negative messages. It's not just celebrating a god or a being or a spiritual entity or whatever it is. So I think you don't have to be religious at all to enjoy what is offered by some of the most powerful recordings you're ever likely to hear.
What I love about gospel music myself is that I think all great music, the good stuff, is always done with a very pure belief that this is the sound they want to make, whether it's punk or metal or whatever it is. There's a truth in what they say. And the great thing about gospel is these people really do believe what they're saying, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's the outpouring of the soul. This isn't airs and graces. This is something that they absolutely believe intrinsically, and consequently, performances that come out, particularly if you are a fan of vocal soul music and vocals in general, you will hear some of the most creative, powerful, unique vocals within gospel music.
There's a certain amount of misunderstanding about gospel music because I think a lot of people think that anything that goes on in a church is going to reek of frankincense and dull old vicars doing their thing, and B, that the gospel that appears in people's minds before they really listen to it is something that just belongs there and doesn't have any connection with the outside world. But of course you've shown through your brilliant compilations that gospel can be funk, it can be disco, it can be all manner of different styles, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that 100%. As gospel is for want of a better phrase, it's a very broad church. When you start listening to music, it's one of the most all-encompassing genres that I've ever come across. And when I first started collecting back in the mid-80s, I collected jazz. Jazz was my first love. And then I went on to include secular soul recordings, funk 45s, etc., etc. I did the trip, if you like.
Yeah.
But gospel is so all-encompassing in different styles, tenures, textures. I happen to kind of specialise, if you like, in air quotes, music from the mid-60s right up until the early 90s. It's particularly fascinating because it very quickly accelerates from early soul music into disco, into modern soul, all within quite a short time frame. So I find, and you're absolutely right, the gospel, it can be completely misconstrued just by, even if you look at the lyrical content, people can get put off by somebody sometimes overly mentioning a god or the Holy Spirit or whatever, and it's a shame that happens when really just try and focus on the performance and hopefully you'll get it, if you know what I mean.
I mean, I always say to people, just every time he says God, just replace it in your brain with baby. You know?
right. I mean, if you do look at a lot of secular soul recordings, a lot of it isn't lyrically engaging.
Yeah.
At any rate, you know, a lot of it is. Don't get me wrong. There are so many beautiful soul recordings, some of which I own here. But sometimes when it starts to get a little bit, love this, love baby, baby, love baby. It's, you know, you're not investing in the lyrical content there either. Yeah. So,
and often those records, they are basically. I mean, certainly you look at Sam Cooke's work when he crosses over into secular soul, and some of those early recordings of his and many other ex-gospel singers, they are just basically gospel songs where they literally have replaced God with baby or love or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sam is a good starting point of, and the Soul Stirrers is a very good starting point. I was in Philadelphia and we saw a show by an artist, Ron and the Hip Tones, and he closed his show doing a version of A Change Is Gonna Come.
Oh, amazing.
Which is, and it really was kind of something special. So there's a tune that is 50, 60 years in the making, it still resonates today. That can be the power of gospel music. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. One aspect I'd like to talk to you about a little bit. When I first got into gospel music, like I said, it's this guy Mike McGonigal and his compilations, and he used to specialise in finding old 78s, the real, really early stuff from the 30s and 40s. And I think initially what I enjoyed about it was the feeling of history I got off it. That these recordings, they're not recorded well. I mean, they're obviously very scratchy and there's loads of static noise about it. But when I listened to them, it was like my imagination suddenly went black and white and I was in a different place. And I could feel the history coming out of the audio,
Yep.
And I think what's really interesting is that initial response that I had was actually quite a lot to do with the physical medium. And you have basically dedicated the last 30 years of your life to collecting what must be, a few tons of plastic by now?
Yeah. You could say.
I mean, I saw the other day there was a discussion going on Facebook with you where someone was saying, you're going to start, I think it's Snowboy actually, saying you're going to have to start thinking about what are you going to do with this, because it's become a very important collection, hasn't it?
I think so. I've been collecting 45s and LPs from that era that I mentioned earlier for, as you say, 30 years. Plus also I've been collecting a subsection which I think is going to be quite important at some point, of sermons. I don't know anybody that seems to be collecting sermons, or if they are, I'm not aware of them, but I'd love to hear from you if you do. But I think these pieces of vinyl that encapsulated absolute moments of history. People talking to their congregation about whatever issue it is of the day, and I have in the region of about close to 1,000 sermon LPs.
Wow, really? That's amazing.
Yeah,
you mentioning the fact that, of course, these would be contemporary recordings that would reflect whenever they were read out in church, because church really, in a way, it's how the congregation gets their news quite often, and how they're asked to interpret the news through the lens of their beliefs.
Yeah, and their pastor, their beloved pastor. When you actually start to discover what type of churches it is that we're talking about, and you drive around certain areas like Philadelphia, like Detroit, Chicago, etc., you realise that these really were micro ministries, almost like just a converted house, where maybe the congregation was 25 to 30 people. But yet one day they pressed record on a player and recorded the session. So these sermons that I've been accumulating for some time, I have a theory on those that they are 100% historical documents that are in danger of being lost. And I think at some point a museum or some kind of archival entity will benefit from having those recordings, and that's probably what I will do with the sermons at some point.
I think that's a laudable thing to do. I think gospel has this particularly interesting angle where, because it's based around a congregation, these records could be pressed up for less than 100 people, couldn't they? I mean, this could be really small, like VIP runs.
Well, we have the case in point for Divine Disco compilation that we did with Cultures of Soul. There was a track on the Volume 2 by Jesse R. Maguire. A version of Jesus is on the main line. I've managed to locate, I dug a 45 in the heart of Detroit. Managed to find Jesse and got the track license for the compilation, but not before he told us the whole story. One of which is the 45 was recorded and the wrong labels were put on the 45. Consequently, the church that funded the recording had an argument with Jesse that it was faulty product and decided to bin everything.
Oh no!
Yeah, and what they'd only pressed up 50 copies just for the congregation.
Wow.
So whatever I found in the heart of Detroit was probably rescued out of a trash can somewhere.
That's amazing. I mean, that's truly. I mean, this is why I said in the intro, I really admire you as a DJ, because you are living in a world that is a million miles away from the speed and convenience of downloading a WAV. I mean, you really do go out and dig, don't you?
Absolutely, and I absolutely love it. Every day I go out digging, wherever possible. I dig around Los Angeles and around California. That's a relatively easy dig to do because it's local to me. But traveling to other cities and to other states is essential, because gospel very often didn't make it out of the certain cities or states for that very reason that I just said. A lot of this stuff is micro pressings, which only were intended for the smallest congregation on a street corner housing facility, So and when you find records like that, it's just the biggest thrill.
What's the strangest sort of places you found these records?
There's quite a few that come to mind, but let me tell you the story of one. A record that Kev Darge was playing out at Deep Funk at the time, and he used to have it covered up. I used to dance to this record, and I would bug him each day, each time he played it. Can you tell me what the record is, Kev? I love this record. It's a beautiful record. I need to know it. Anyway, I bugged him enough that he eventually took the labels off, and he said, "There it is. Yeah, you're annoying little bugger, you." And he showed me the label, and off I went. And I was actually going on a digging trip 2 days later. I ended up in St. Louis, the Electric Ladyland record store. And there was a guy working there, and he said, "You need to come to my house. I've got records in the basement." And okay, fine. So we went to the house, went into the basement, and oh my God, If it was like walking into the train spotting toilet.
Wow.
The stench was pretty bad. He had two of the furriest cats that you ever see sitting on top of all of the records, so fur balls everywhere. But we had to get through it, and in that stack I found 13 copies of the record that Kerb had showed me was his latest cover up.
Wow, all together, just double.
Yeah,
like
all
13.
together in a batch. It was just right there. You felt like you needed a 4-day shower when you came out of there.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of cover-upping, and is it competitive? Do you find people getting a bit narky about what you're playing and what they've got?
I have seen cover-ups, and I'll be honest with you, in days of old, I kind of trod that path a little bit myself. Never felt comfortable doing it.
It's a strange thing, isn't it?
Yes, and I never felt comfortable doing it. I have had some run-ins with people in the past that have asked me to keep quiet on what they are covering up. Yeah. I know what that cover-up is, and they told, well, can you keep it quiet? And I'm like, but I played it on the radio show. So in my opinion, I guess it's not for me to tell you what to do as a DJ, but I don't really approve of the practice myself.
Well, I have to say, I love the fact that you have found these records and put out these compilations, and they are just like gold dust to me. They're so amazing to hear those sounds in a place where we couldn't be further away from the rural south of America. Do you know what I mean? And
right.
I feel like you've done a great service to a lot of people by actually sharing this music, because music is there to be shared, and certainly if you're talking about gospel, I mean it literally means good news, doesn't it? I mean the whole point of gospel is that you go and tell the people. So
exactly.
It's lovely for us to get that music, and it feels nice as well to know that you're doing this properly, and getting those artists paid, and giving them, letting them know that what they made so long ago actually is appreciated still, and people still do love the sounds they made.
Yeah, I have to say absolute props to the record labels that I work with. That they insist on that they're doing things correctly. And that's exactly how I would want it. I had a great story actually that I posted up one or two things on a YouTube clip by, and one of them was one of my favourite 45s of all time by Herman Harris and the voices of Faith, Hope and Love. Fantastic. And Mr. Herman Harris himself reached out to me and said, I can't believe that my record is on the internet, and I'm absolutely thrilled by it. And we developed a relationship, which was amazing. Got the track licensed, and I happened to find a second copy of the 45 on a digging drill, and I sent him it as a Christmas present one year. He didn't know he was coming. It was coming in the post. Yeah. I just sent it to him, and he phoned me. Him and his daughter were practically in tears at the end of the phone, which was I haven't seen this record since 1977 when it was recorded. So so that was special moments like that. Keep the heart warmed and what we're doing is, I mean, I love doing it at any rate, and I would do it regardless. But when you actually get messages of warmth and love like that, it really does make you want to keep going and go the extra mile.
Well, I really hope you do, because you've certainly brought a lot of joy into my life, and certainly one of my favourite things when I'm DJing now is playing, full-on spiritual music to drunk atheists, and always goes down really well.
Great, excellent.
So tell us, Greg. I mean, you've brought out some amazing compilations, the Savoy ones and the Divine Chord ones. What's next in the pipeline for you? You still got some more stuff coming out, and tell us where we can listen to your music and your radio shows.
The radio show is the Divine Chord Gospel Show. It airs the fourth Saturday of every month on doublelab.com, generally dropping at 10 a.m. US PST, so in a relevant time zone near you. And you can check out all of the archives available on my Mixcloud page, which is just DJ Greg Belson. You can check me out also on Soho Radio and No Barriers Radio. As far as compilations are concerned, I'm working on several things at the moment, which is great. We're hoping to have Honest Johns have fully licensed for the first time from Universal Music, who are notoriously difficult to license from. A Checker compilation, Checker Gospel. Excellent. And that will be coming out hopefully in the beginning of 2024. I'm also working on another Divine Funk compilation with Cultures of Soul, and also hopefully one or two things with Numero Group, but I can't say too much about those.
Listen, Greg, It's lovely to talk to you, and thank you for all the work you do in this field, and I just wish you the very best of luck. May your digs always bear fruit.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on here, Eamon. It was been a pleasure talking to you.
What we're gonna do right here is go back.
Way back into time.
That's right.
Name that tune.
Get up, everybody.
Name that tune.
In the music industry, the word legend is used a little too often, but what else can you say about our guest today? Marshall Chess cut his teeth in the family business, which happened to be Chess Records, a label so influential it can genuinely claim to be the home of rhythm and blues and rock and roll. My first Chess compilation had John Lee Hooker, Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy Williamson, Etta James, and well, I could go on, but that would only serve to touch on the very beginnings of Marshall's career. He went on to form Cadet Records, he worked with Mick and Kieth to create Rolling Stone Records, he signed the Rotary Connection and Minnie Ripperton, worked with Sire, he even produced an audio comic book with KRS-One for Marvel, I kid you not. Never one to stand still in the industry, he has embraced the world of modern music and successfully fuses it with his own family legacy. And at 81, Marshall is still pushing things forward with New Moves, a star-studded concept album that fuses hip-hop with the very roots of rock and roll that his father embraced some 70 plus years ago. It's my great honour to talk to the legendary Marshall Chess. How are you, Marshall?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be here with you. And I love that intro. It made me feel, puffs me up. You know what I
Well, I have to say, I mean, I was looking at your sort of Wikipedia and list of achievements, and you have had a long... I mean, you were basically born in a record label, weren't you?
That's the thing. I'm one of the few people. I was born in 1942. My father went into the music business in 1945. Wow. So my whole life, it was like if my father had a fruit stand, I would know about apples and oranges. You know? I mean, I was raised with it. And my father was a workaholic. And my mother, you know, I was the first son. I had two sisters. And my mother, of course, you're never home, you're never home. He wasn't playing baseball with me. He was really working all the time.
Yeah.
I was at the office. I loaded trucks. I worked the record press. And I even went to the first Chess recording session in 1947. I slept on metal folding chairs to a jazz record called My Foolish Heart, Gene Ammons. So I've been around my whole life, you know.
Yes, it must have been. I mean, were you actually like hanging around the studio a lot? Did you see all these amazing people come in and record their sessions?
I saw them. I knew them. I was there as much as I could. I was enamored with the whole thing. I had a little motorbike when I was 13 illegally. I used to drive there every day in the summer. Really, I wanted to be around my father. Really, that's how it began. And he was always there. And my uncle, his younger brother, I became very close with. And and they were immigrants from Poland, so they had no problem with that immigrant style. In fact, my father, one time after I began working full-time and no one told me what to do, I was coming there every day, and I asked my father, we were at a car wash, and I said, what's my job? I come every day. No one's told me how much I'm getting paid, what I'm going to do. He said, I won't say the swear word, but he said, you stupid fool. He said, your job's watching me. And that was how I was raised. So he dragged me around, and little by little. The first time he told me I have to go to the bank. We had the studio upstairs of the offices. He said, "I'm going to the bank. Go up, there has a, you have to go up to the studio, take care of it." I said, "Well, what do I do?" He said, "Just tell them to take another one. Take another one." He said, "Because if you don't, they're just going to sit around doing nothing, and one of those takes might be the one." So that's how I began producing, with Take Another One.
Wow.
I actually used that same technique on this latest album to get the last track done.
Yeah, well, the album seems to have the album's got a really lovely symmetry for for your whole career, really, because you've got like the cream of hip hop and some fantastic musicians all working
Just
together to kind of recreate the original feel of the blues and rock and roll records that belong to the Chess stable. Tell us a little bit about New Moves, because this has been quite a long project to get off the ground, isn't it?
It's a long, years and years project. It started out with an idea. Well, first of all, in 1981, Chess Records was purchased and owned by a hip-hop label called Sugarhill Records in New Jersey, where hip-hop was born. Grandmaster Flash, Melly Mel. So I went there to see this Joe Robinson, the owner, and I said, some lawyers had come to me, and I was after the Stones, and I was getting rid of taking too much sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's the best way to put it. And they said, "Look, Chess has been bought by this small label in New Jersey. Try to buy it back. We'll finance it and give you 49%. So I went to see this Joe Robinson, the hip-hop mogul, and he said to me, "Man, if you'd have come here a month ago," he said, I'd have kissed your feet." He said, "Me and Sylvia just bought a Rolls Royce, and they had that first giant hip-hop called Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang, which had sold 1 million. And then he said, "Well, I got this Chess catalog. What can I do to get you to help me with it?" And, my son was just born that year, 81, and I went to work there. I came from the country. I hired 2 people. We had just 3 of us, and I began to put together all these compilations. And because I love studios, and this is the day, really right before the electronic hip-hop era really took off, I started hanging out in the studio with all the musicians, and that's where I met my partner since 1981 on music, Keith LeBlanc, who was the drummer of the Sugar Hill rhythm section, and then the guitar was Little Axe, Skip McDonald, and I began hanging out there. And then a few years went by, 1.5 years, 2 years went by, and I started getting screwed. I wasn't getting my money for the work I was doing, typical music business thing. So I asked Joe Robinson, well, he owed me $40,000. And I said, "Joe, can you give me studio time? I want to make records again." And he had put out a record of Malcolm X's speeches. And I got together with Keith LeBlanc, who he was the one I became the closest with. And I made this record with Malcolm X's speeches, and then Sugar Hill thought they owned it. He forgot about the letter I had with the studio time. There was a lawsuit, and that became the first project I did with hip hop and with Keith LeBlanc. And it actually came out in England. I saw a big poster in Brixton of that Malcolm X's picture back then in the 80s called "No Sellout, Malcolm X." And our partner was Malcolm X's wife. It was really very interesting. And the first thing she told me when I met her was, "I hate white people." That's how it started,
That's good to get this out of the way, isn't it?
Let's get it out. But she told that to the wrong guy, because I probably was more comfortable around, at that time in my life, I was more comfortable around black people than I was around white people, and that was my whole life. I was raised with black people and felt very comfortable, in that situation. So we became friends, and the record never came out in America due to the lawsuit, but that's how I started. And Keith and I, we just, years after that, we decided to try to do a blues record using samples of the original singers, like Muddy's voice with Keith's tracks. And there were a lot of legal problems with Universal, who by that time had owned the Chess catalog. And it was the beginning of all that sampling era.
Yeah.
And I was too far ahead of time for them. They didn't even get what we were trying to do. So we just let it sleep. And then maybe in 2016, Keith called me up. He wanted to build a little studio. Could I loan him some money for some equipment? And he said, I'll work on tracks. Let's get up with this idea. And we came up with the idea of doing that album again, but this time getting musicians to play and a vocalist. And I suggested Bernard Fowler, who's to me one of the greatest R&B singers around. I mean, he sings with the Rolling Stones to this day on all their tours. He's just a great singer. It's amazing to me that he's never become a superstar on his own, but that doesn't always happen for people. Anyway, we began to make the record, and then it comes to the UK, and I'm in the UK. The publisher of the Chess songs was BMG in the UK. And Alistair Newbury, the president at that time of BMG Records, he said, what are you doing? And I played him like sort of a few tracks, a rough demo of this idea Keith and I were working on. And he loved the high temperature that actually became the single of this new one. And he loved that song. And he said, can I buy this for BMG? And I said, yeah, of course. We were shocked. I was shocked. So we made a deal with a lawyer, a signed contract. The album was not even finished. And then things started to happen. The Brexit thing came up. It was right before COVID. And then I had a horrible experience in November of 2019. I had had 6 years of back problems. And in 2019, I got off the chair and my left leg wouldn't work. I mean, I couldn't walk. My back, I had this horrible spinal, collapse, on part of my spine. And then my nightmare began of having double spinal surgery. The first one failed. Having to learn to walk again. And the year after surgery, I just was laying on the couch watching the news all the time.
That's no good for your head, is it?
And learning to walk. I started, with crutches, then a cane and a walker, and a brace, and little by little walking, and you can walk. I walk fine now. I wear a brace, but it took during that. So I got bored. I called Keith. And I said, what if I'm going to see if I can get that album back. Let's make it better. Let's do something with it. I can't sit around anymore. I need to do something creative. And I called Alistair. And by now, COVID had hit. So offices were closed. And part of the deal was I was going to come to the UK. We were going to make a video. But everything got delayed because of Brexit and then COVID. So I said, Alistair, will you sell me back that album? And he said, no, better than that, I'll give it back to you. Wow. Because they're the publishers, and obviously they were delayed. Their releases were delayed probably for years with the COVID thing and the whole thing. Their offices were closed. And then we began. We added new tracks. We added musicians. We made it into this final album. That took another 8 or 10 months. And then my son, who's just turned 42, also is in the music business, third generation. He said, "Let's put this thing out." So we did. We started this label called CZYZ, which is the original chess name from Poland.
Oh, of course, because of the Polish connection.
You arrived in America, and the customs guy said, "How do you pronounce that?" And it was pronounced Ches. He said, "Oh, now it's chess." That's how it began.
Keep it simple.
That's the story. And the album came out great, and it got me off the couch, and got me doing stuff again. And it's not. I guess I'm like a racehorse trainer who every morning goes out to the track and he watches the horse run, and he sees a good one and he wants that horse to win. I love hits, I love making records. I just love making records, producing records, projects. It's just something I love to do. And it's a dying thing because I come from being a record man. You do it all. That's what I'm doing now. Thinking of the project, making it in your head, and then making the project. Wow.
Yeah, well, it sounds like this album's you really worked for it. And the idea of you, coming a cropper with all the political troubles and then the pandemic and you're back. I mean, that you really have struggled to get this thing going. So
yeah, I did, and so that was the situation. So the album just came out August 11th. It's getting a lot of great response. We're getting, we're getting a lot of PR in the next few months. A lot of people like it. We'll see what happens. And I'm talking to you now, promoting it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm proud of it. It's really a great record. The musicians are just, even going back to Chess, all the way back. The secret of Chess was the best musicians. The best sound. My father didn't know anything about music, but he soon learned that the best music sold the most records.
Yeah.
Those were the hits. And he showed me, like, we had this famous bass player and producer of blues called Willie Dixon.
Yes.
And he showed me how Willie was the guy that got the band together to play on all the blues records. That was the secret. And of course, in that era, these guys didn't even have telephones. So Willie knew where the girl they were sleeping with that week, and he would get the band together. And that's how it began, with knowing that the quality of the musicians really was the first step, in making it great. It really was.
And
that's how it began.
It's interesting because, when one thinks of a record label, you think of everything being compartmentalized, so-and-so does this, so-and-so does that. But in those early days of Chess, it was kind of, a one or two man band, maybe we'll say. But, you had to kind of wrangle the artists, you had to get the studio, you had to make sure all the equipment was right. You had to do it all, didn't you? It wasn't like a producer didn't sit in an office and say, go in there.
No, I remember the first Chess, before we built our own studios, they made a glass window between two offices that people worked in all day. And they'd have a wire recorder. And that's how they'd cut demos. I remember the first session I saw in that situation where there was only two mics. So they would walk up to the mic and then wait back off to do their part. So yeah, it was very basic and raw. Although we did start in 1947 there was a great studio in Chicago named Universal. And from that we built our own. But we realized it was the quality of the studio, the quality of the musicians, and the quality of the artists. We had so many fabulous artists. It's mind-boggling to me. Eamon, I've been riding around for the last 2 years in my car with 45 Chess CDs. That's all I've been playing. And I have become a fan. Before I was a businessman. Oh my God. I'm enamored with Little Walter now. Wow, I could see why Miles Davis called him a genius. I mean, it was just so, some of these records are so spectacular that my father and uncle made. And then the crazy part is, I hear my father and uncle's voice on a lot of them. That I haven't heard. You hear your father.
Yeah.
You're 80 years old, and when he's in his 20s,
Yeah.
and it blows your mind, yeah.
I'll bet it does. It's funny because that whole era, that the music was, it's so timeless, because not only are there great songs and that, but there was I guess for my age, it would be like a punk spirit. There was a rebellious spirit in all of that music. And that hasn't been lost at all. I can remember when I worked in my record shop when I was in my teens, we had a Chess compilation come in, and it was £1.99, which is super cheap. And I bought that, and honestly, that record changed my life. But I wasn't a child of that era at all, and my parents weren't even into that sort of music. But for some reason, it creeps across the decades and still makes sense, and still had like an excitement and a rebelliousness to it. Your father and the whole of the setup at Chess, they were kind of swimming against the tide quite a lot, because you're an immigrant family that come in, you're working with black musicians recording music that, at the time was not accepted in the mainstream at all.
Not accepted or even played at all. It wasn't not even, and not only that, you had the racial aspect, before civil rights in America,
And you end up, in this situation where you're working with Malcolm X's wife and putting out that album, which must be a hell of a digger's prize now. It must be a collector's item, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But that's exactly what happened, and it's full circle. But the thing is, music, music is magic. Even if you say, what is magic? The most apparent magic is music. It changes the way you feel. You just described it. How when you were younger, how it changed. It's something about it. It's magical, and this blues music was really special because you had, for instance, Chess was in Chicago in the 40s after World War II on. Over 1 million black people came up to Chicago from the South. People who couldn't read or write in generally. This is soon after slavery, before civil rights. And they ran into all those big city problems.
Yeah.
At the same time, blues evolved from being acoustic on a porch in Mississippi to the electric guitar, amplifier, loud drums, bars opening, guys working in the steel mill all week, making more money than they ever made in their lives in a month because they didn't even have factories in the South. But they ran into all these problems, and how I'm saying this to you is I didn't really understand the purpose of when I first started making compilations and blues lyrics. But as life went on, I saw that it's like psychoanalysis. It's therapy. It's like they're about people's troubles with women, people's troubles with money, and it's great when you're having trouble to know that it's a shared experience. And the original purpose of a lot of those early Chess records, was the blues that really shared all these experiences in a way very poetic. That's why all these Chess artists in a way are like poets,
Yeah.
But then Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley hit in 1955, and boom, that's when white kids really that's what was our first crossover. And in fact, when Maybelline broke big in 1955. Most radio in America thought Chuck Berry was white. When the word got out that he was black, I would say 50% of the airplay stopped of the big white stations. Isn't that amazing?
That is.
Yeah, those are the kind of stories you don't really hear. But there was enough momentum, along with the invention of the car radio and teenagers driving cars. Riding around on my automobile, no particular place to go. So you got the car radio, the beginning of rock and roll, the birth of the beat, and it exploded. And we just happened to be, by pure chance. It wasn't, we're going to make rock and roll. Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley came 6 months apart, and it was by pure chance, and it exploded,
Yeah.
And,
it changed the world. People say, like in my intro, I said stuff, like the word legend is overused, and saying this changed the world or whatever, this music changed everything. But this is all true of Chess Records because, from the mid-50s, the teenager was a thing, and the last, 70 years or so, all of the modern culture we have around music basically came through that rock and roll portal, that blues and rock and roll portal, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely did.
I think what I find quite interesting is Chess was founded and just interested in that music and not bothered about the black and white and all that sort of thing. And they get this music out there. They create this incredible scene that changes the whole world. It's interesting to me that a lot of people who are, deeply associated with a particular scene, whether that be hip hop or jungle or whatever it might be, a lot of those people get so involved with the excitement of that time that nothing ever lives up to it afterwards, and it becomes like they become stuck in that time. But that doesn't appear to have happened with you.
No, it didn't. But one of the reasons that with Chess and with me and what I observed growing up was as the black people started making money, the black culture started making money and is expanding all across America, new markets opened up. So that it wasn't just rock and roll and blues. We discovered a jazz market. We had all the black comedians. Then gospel. We had Aretha Franklin's first album.
Oh yes,
because her father was. He had the first sermons. We must have sold 1,078 RPM sermons over 5 years from one radio, a large what they call the clear channel radio station in the South. Because there wasn't TV churches or any of those things. There weren't even churches through the South in those small towns. Now they were getting sermons on records,
Amazing.
And then the comedy on records because definitely weren't comedy clubs in the Deep South.
And you wouldn't
So-
hear any of that sort of comedy on the radio at all, would you?
No. And then, of course, in 1967, I convinced my family to let me start a label called Cadet Concept. And that was going to be a psychedelic. That was the beginning of that whole Woodstock psychedelic era, and I did. I got very lucky. I had with the Minnie Ripperton, the first album, Rotary Connection with Minnie Ripperton, then Electric Mud with Muddy Waters, and by 1969 I had 3 or 4 albums on the charts. But then what happened is my father decided to sell the company because we had started, it was really him and my uncle had started black radio in Chicago, WVON, Voice of the Negro. And it became, of course, like Chess Records, a hit. It was number one. A little small powered station became the number one nighttime radio station. And it was purchased. And what he wanted to do, they wanted to start black television. So they decided to sell Chess Records. And that was like the best and worst part of my life. I mean, because I was raised to run it and take it over.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they said it's going away, but you'll get enough money from the sale to start your own label. Don't worry. And I was actually going to start a label, and Boz Scaggs was going to be my first artist.
Really?
Yeah, really. But then my father died at the end of '69. And that was it. That was the year I had the Fathers and Sons album. It was my best year in the business. He died without a will, and the government took all the money. I never got the money to start a label.
No.
And I was sitting around. No, I was sitting around, depressed, doing nothing. My marriage was in bad shape. Everything was terrible. And I got a call from a guy named Bob Krasno. He owned a label called Blue Thumb. And later on, he became the president of Elektra Records years later. But he said, Marshall, I had known him for years. He said, Marshall, I heard the Rolling Stones are looking for a new manager, a new label. They're done with Decca and Alan Klein. Let's do something together. And I didn't really want to work with anyone. My ego's big now, I guess, but it was much bigger then, way big.
Well, with good reason, you did all right, didn't you?
Yeah, at least I could say that, with a smile on my face. But I said no. I said, give me Mick's number, and that's how that started. Wow. I flew over. I talked to Mick, Mick Jagger, and we decided he introduced me to all his financial people, and we started Rolling Stones Records.
And of course, they would know all about chess because they were absolutely besotted by that label, weren't they?
They got their name from Lee Waters' record, Rolling Stone. Oh yeah, they definitely. I had known them in 1964. Their manager, Andrew Oldham. Well, if someone with a foreign, I set up the Chess European. That's another thing I did. I really helped spread it in the UK with Pi Records, with Marble Arch, discount. That was the idea. Put it out cheap. That first few years, we put all the chess stuff on Marble Arch just to get all these guys out there. Then we started chess. So, I was very involved coming to the UK back and forth. I knew about the Stones and the Animals and the Yardbirds. And I knew they were enamored with chess. And I used to go on radio. It was a disc jockey called Mike Raven then. I'd go on his show on BBC, talk about the blues and stuff back then. So then in 1964, my uncle said, there's a guy with a foreign accent on the phone. So anyone with a foreign accent got switched to me. So it was Andrew Oldham. He said, look, we're doing our second tour of America. I'm the manager of the Rolling Stones. Could we record in Chess Studios? That's our dream. Fantastic. Well, we never let outside people then. And I said, I'll talk to my family. And I convinced my family, let's do it. They're playing our songs. They had already done Mona. And they've done 3 or 4 songs, So I said, come on, let's do it. We'll get the songwriters to come by. And they came to Chicago. And of course, that was like, that was an interesting experience. I mean, they came there for I think 4 days. Actually, that's where they did the first version of Satisfaction. And then they finished it in L.A. And they even named an instrumental after our address, 2120 South Michigan. I think that's one of their own instrumentals.
Amazing.
So that's how I met them. And then of course, and then when I went to London, Mick said to me, well, Keith lived down the street on Cheney Walk, down the road. He said, tonight we're going to our rehearsal room on the East End. Come with us. Go see Keith. And then I walked down the road and we knocked on Keith's door, and some guy, his houseman or whatever it was, an Italian guy answered. And I went up the stairs, and there was Keith with Graham Parsons, who invented country rock, sitting behind this big yellow grand piano, writing songs.
Wow.
And the first thing Keith said to me, man, you look different, because when they came to Chicago, I was at that era. You had to be a super sharp dressed man,
Yeah.
and drive
Before
the best
all the-
car.
all the
That's how
flower power,
your artist respected you.
Yeah.
If you. So, but by the time I got to Keith's house, I had jeans on, and a T-shirt, and that was the first remark Keith Richards made to me. Man, you look different, And so they took me to East London that night in the car, and it was the first time I saw all the those little gas heaters at every window, You put the pence in to get the heat in your house. I said, what's all those glowing lights? Yeah, those are heaters. And then we got to the a basement cellar studio in this old building, and what was on the wall? My poster of Electric Mud.
Wow.
So I knew that was omen. That was an omen.
Yeah.
And then we made within a couple of weeks, so we had a deal, and that we founded Rolling Stones Records, and that the first album was Sticky Fingers. And,
what a first record to pull out of the bag, by the way.
Exile on Main Street, and I just loved it. I was in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, that was their imperial phase, really, because as far as albums
great.
go,
With Mick Taylor. I thought was that the Mick Taylor Keith Richard combination was just brilliant. The interplay of the two different styles. They even played two different kinds of guitars. I love that. Was a great era. Although Ronnie Wood's a fabulous, I have nothing bad to say about him.
Of course.
They're still the Rolling Stones, but I love that was a great creative era for them and for me, and they allowed me free reign. We were originally going to have a label. That's why we started Rolling Stones Records.
Yeah.
The original idea was, we made that tongue lips logo. And that was involved in that. On the car from Amsterdam to Rotterdam, where we were recording, I went to get oil and petrol in a Shell petrol station. And in Chicago, the one where I lived had said Shell in red letters underneath that yellow shell. But in Holland, it doesn't say the letters. It's known so much. So I said to the Stones, we need a logo. We need a logo that doesn't need words. And that's how the idea of that tongue and lips, without any words, came up.
that one idea must have, I mean, I don't want to talk money, but let's talk money. Just that one idea, that must have, sparked a $1 million industry on its own.
It wasn't me. I didn't design the tongue and the lip.
No, but the idea to do it, do you know what I mean?
The idea to we were ahead of our time. My dad used to always say with all those psychedelic albums, being ahead of the time is being behind time, You have to be on time. But yeah, we were ahead of our time and with that. And that was it was great. And we were going to sign other artists. In fact, we were talking to Jimi Hendrix, who was going to be free on contract outside of the U.S. So he was going to be hopefully the next artist. And then we would give him his own logo. And we wanted to that was the idea of the label, to sign stars who were tired with the major labels as their contracts expired. Give them their own special thing, their own special label, because we saw the beginning of merchandising. We knew that was coming,
Yeah, and again, that period, a lot of people won't know about this, but the psychedelic era in many ways was at odds with what had come before with rock and roll and stuff. But you, especially with the Cadet label, you kind of were instrumental in merging those two. Tell us a little bit about Electric Mud and what you did with those albums with Muddy Waters and Howlin Wolf.
What happened is, I got my idea for Electric Mud was, it began when we did one of our first blues album was Muddy Waters live at the Newport Jazz Festival. And this is the beginning of the album era. We knew it wasn't a black market because they didn't have players. They didn't have record players. It was the beginning of the 33 player. Only people with, more affluent people had this record players and systems. So all of a sudden we started getting sales from Boston on that album. And we realized, that, God, it's white people buying blues albums. Wow. So, wow, Marshall, you're the one. Start putting together blues compilations for this new white market. So basically, I had all this early experience of putting together. I had the folk blues series, the real folk blues, super blues. I kept making these compilations, aiming them at the white market, because at the same time, in America, this kind of alternative radio was beginning. So you could get airplay and exposure. And music festivals, and the Woodstock Festival came, and then the Atlantic, and this whole new generation of, pot smoking, long-haired, rock and roll people, and then the psychedelic wave hit with the LSD and the mushrooms, and I was part of that era. I mean, I went to see Tim Leary. Bob Dylan opened up for him, wearing white robes, I mean, this is the early part.
What I would give to have been at your side during all this. Amazing.
Yeah, well, I just was part of that era. It was my era, and I had the key to the studio. And Muddy Waters was like a grandfather to me. He used to call me his white grandson, I knew him. I mean, him and my father were really friends. They both would say that without each other, they both wouldn't have made it. Muddy would say, your dad made me and I made him. And I would say, yeah, those were the first big hits we had, and his first big taste of success, Yeah. So blues was not selling to black people anymore. They were getting into Motown, R&B, soul music was starting. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, I want to do this. I've got this idea. I want to put together, I knew, again, like same way I put together this new album band. I knew a handful of the top young black avant-garde musicians at that time, and I put the word out. And I ended up putting together this great band of, young black musicians. Pete Cozy, who later played with Miles Davis, Maurice Jennings with Ramsey Lewis. These were like great musicians, where it all starts. I had already learned my lesson from my family about that. And I picked the songs, and I picked the songs, and I told Muddy, this is my idea, trust me, because this is a way for you to make some money, and there's a whole new market out there. Mm-hmm. And my family was very intent on, my job was to push our product to this new market, That's really what I'm doing now.
You got the support. You got the support to actually try and push things forward, yeah?
Yes, because I said this the other day to someone, and I realized that I never thought of it. One of the great perks of being a record producer, especially a record man, is you get used to failure. So you're not afraid to try things, because most of what you do fails. I mean, I made a lot of records that I had, before I made one that sold. And you get used to failure. It's a toughening experience. It rolls off your back, and you make another record, and you make another one. Yeah. So yeah, I had the support of my family. Although my father would sometimes, he'd say, man, he said, I don't know, too much. They'd make jokes about it.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been confusing to them.
But Muddy Waters became the biggest selling Muddy Waters blues album we ever had, quickly.
Yeah.
And then a nightmare happened. After like 3 months, the album exploded. Mm-hmm. I remember we shipped like 150,000. That was a lot. I mean, blues albums, if you shipped 10,000 back then, This was big. It broke on the white radio. I drove across country visiting all those alternative radio stations, and they put it right on, And Rolling Stone magazine, which was the Bible of that generation at the time, it's when it was like a newspaper before it was, some guy wrote an article saying the worst blues album ever made. And half the airplay stopped overnight. And, and then, that changed it. Years later, recently, some article the same writer wrote it. Took him 40 years to love it. He loves it now. So, yeah, he admits it.
You got him in the end, Marshall. You
Well,
got
it was
him in
my
the end.
father. Yeah, my father's thing. Ahead of your time or behind, it's the same thing. If you're too far ahead, people aren't going to like it. You know?
Yeah, but I mean,
know.
so you've done that. So you've grown up in chess, and then you've been part of this psychedelic revolution, and you're working with the Rolling Stones, and that continues on. Minnie Ripperton, all these amazing artists still coming through. Now, that's a lot of progression already. But when hip hop came along, this is a completely different animal, isn't it? Because, like you say, it was the start of all this sampling and using old records to make new records, and that was controversial, wasn't it? How did you first get hold of hip hop? When was it just
Because I went to Sugar Hill to buy the chess catalog.
Was it literally that? Yeah.
Yeah. And then I went to work there. I drove there every week. I had two people working for me, putting together these albums. I got exposed to it. I was there when they created these classics, White Lines, The Message. I was there when that all happened.
What did you think of that? Because that was so
I
different.
loved it. No, because to me it was the new version of the blues.
Yeah.
It was street poetry again, just being put out with a different beat. The names even were the same: Muddy Waters, Grandmaster Flash, Big Daddy. You know what I mean? There was a similarity of generations, a similarity of spreading street. That's why I say it's like poetry. It's spreading stuff from the street to the public. All those early hip hop records are real. That's real serious street stuff, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Know,
And that's
drugs,
still what it trades on, you know.
It still is. It still is in most cases, you know. Then of course, white kids discovered hip hop like they discovered blues, you know. And it expanded. But I got right into the hip hop thing. I understood it immediately. That wasn't the problem, you know.
That's what I was
had
wondering.
no problem with it. In fact, I loved it. I thought it was great. You know?
Yeah, just straight off the bat, it's straight into that.
Yeah, when that guy Fletcher, when he wrote White Lines, I was there and he came and read me the lyrics. Said, this is just like a great blues song, you know. You're talking about what's happening on the street, and I got really exposed to the culture. And then I became friends with KRS-One. I did this comic book project.
Tell me about that, because I read about that yesterday evening, and I just thought, he did what?
I still look at that. I still have a box of them, man. Marvel
Send me
comics,
one.
the biggest. Well, here's what I will send me your address. I will send you one. Do you have a cassette player?
Oh yeah.
They're Psychosonic comics. They're sold with a cassette.
You're
And I
joking.
got the idea. My daughter was 3 years old, and I don't know if they have it in the UK, but they have these kids cassettes then that you turn the page when the dog barks. You know?
Yeah, I remember that.
And
Yeah,
she's in the car seat. I'm looking in the back mirror playing it in my stereo, driving her to nursery school, and she's turning the page. And I said, "Shit!" And I saw at Sugar Hill how uneducated these young black kids were.
Yeah.
They really couldn't read. I was sad, man.
Yeah.
It was bad. It wasn't.
It's reality,
it was sad,
isn't it?
to be
It's
honest.
reality.
Really sad. It was really sad to me. And I intellectually had grown enough to realize what was happening with it. You know, they were sort of stupid. They weren't educated. You know, they didn't know. It just was, I didn't like it. I said, this is a great way. I can make a comic book I'm going to make a comic book where they turn the page, and for black kids with a cassette to learn about their history. So that's how it started. And I went to Harlem to one of the only, at that time, black bookstores. And I walked in, and what's a white guy doing here? But, you know, after she got it, she felt my vibes. And she was very educated kind of woman. And she sold me about a dozen books. Like, the guy who invented the traffic light, red, green. and yellow. That's a
all
black
black
man.
inventions,
It's a black man. Yeah. The guy who invented open heart surgery, a black man. No, black kids do not know that.
Yeah.
They don't have any idea of all these good things, these amazing things. So I wrote a story, and it was called what did I call it? Mojo and his magic. Mojo. After that, Kenyatta. Mojo and his magic drum. And I told this lawyer I knew. I said, I've got this idea. I need a rap guy. He said, well, I managed KRS-One. Come on, I'll set up a meeting with you. So I went to his office. I didn't walk this giant 6'4". I'm only 5'6". You know, this
He's
giant,
a big guy.
you know. He's like, well, but I was used to Howlin Wolf, man, who's bigger than KRS-One. You know, you know. And he sat down with me and he read what I wrote. He said, "Man, this is great, but it's too white. You write too white, man." So that's how my relationship with KRS-One, and we became friends. And I was coming to the city 2 or 3 days a week then. I had this job running the publishing company at the same time, and he would come to my hotel, and he always had this guy. This is a great hip hop story. He always had this guy with him, this other big 6'4" guy named ICU, spelled like ICU.
Yeah.
You know, who lived underneath the railroad, Grand Central train station. Underground, there was this whole culture. In
the mole men thing, where they all took over the,
man, this is a true story. And they come in, and KRS hated air conditioning. So it was in the summer, I always had to shut the air conditioning off. And it wasn't it was like a 3-star hotel, you know.
Yeah.
Because I was going there every week. And I opened the window, and they would come with these pints of ice cream, him in this ICU, and then they let them melt on the window and then drink
them, yeah.
This was crazy. And him and I became friends, man. I went to when his kid was born, and I knew his first wife, and then his second wife became his manager. And we created the idea, and you know, we first did it in his hip hop studio. We did it with real people, and they couldn't read the script. Eamon, they couldn't read the script.
Oh my God!
Man.
Yeah, of course.
They would read it like, "I am going." You know, it was a script with music. You'll get it. I'm going to send you that. You're going to hear it.
I'm going to send you my address now. I'm going to hold you that.
Yeah. You're going to get it. I'm going to post it. I'll post it Monday. I promise you. But anyway, so that's what happened. So then I said, what are we going to do, man? We got this great script, the story. So we said, well, there's a black acting agency in New York. I'll make, you know, and I hired a room with a tape recorder where people come to audition. And all these kids came, and man, it was still, they could not really read better, but still, that's really inspired me. I got to get this book out. So then I took it around to I started right at the top. I went to Marvel Comics.
Right on, yeah.
Marvel, and it turns out that at that time, the president of Marvel Comics, he was sort of, he was a collector. He had bought one of Elvis's shirts for $5,000. I gave him one of my father's business cards from Chess Records framed. Next thing I know, I had a deal with this comic, but we came up with an idea. I mean, we got this great black illustrator, Kyle Baker. I found him. I was buying a baseball card, one of these shops that sells weird stuff. Mm-hmm. I asked the guy, one of those, you know, kind of weird nerds in comic books and baseball cards. I said, is there any black illustrators for a comic book? Oh, it's a great guy, Kyle Baker. And I looked him up in the phone book. So he joined our project, and the three of us became partners. And we made this, he drew it. We even have an animated video. You could actually see it. If you go on I have a YouTube channel that for 2 years I've been building with another great Richard Ganter, another UK friend of mine from the Universal days. Mm-hmm. I'm doing it for my young grandchildren so they can get the history digitally. Yeah. So we've got, but I'm putting everything in this little video from the comic is on. It's called the Chess Records Tribute channel on YouTube. Check it out. You can see the video of that, the little video clip of Break the Chain. It used to be around your foot. Now it's around your head. That was the lyric of the thing.
That's amazing. I mean,
so it was amazing.
But
great. They failed. They failed, Marvel. They could not. It was for black kids. They didn't know how to sell it to black kids. They couldn't get it into those shops in the ghetto. Yeah. You know, I couldn't get it to the school system because it was too hip hop. That time hip hop was like too street.
It's funny, isn't it? Because, you know, KRS-One his whole career has been based on edutainment. His whole shtick is about uplifting people who don't know the history and
he still does it. He's a preacher. He's got a church in Atlanta.
Yeah. Still doing it.
I've talked to him recently.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that you keep coming up with with the newest things and seem unfazed by it and encouraging by it.
I've got another one now I'm working on. I can't, I'm since I stopped having to make money, I've gotten more creative, more ideas, in other words, come up. You know,
Yeah.
because I retired with enough probably to live the rest of my life. So then things start to expand. But I'm working on another one. I've got with Kieth. We've got a fabulous. It's gonna be Kieth's album. Fabulous instrumental tracks featuring his fabulous percussion. And then I've got another one called Chest Rides. Little TikTok kind of things you play for young kids that only play with headphones and telephones.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I got other. So yeah, it's keeping me going.
Well-
Eamon. I'm loving doing it. This project really got me young again. You know.
Well, I love it. You know, the title of the album is New Moves, and it is very new. It's got new instrumentation and new vocal treatments. You yourself keep making these new moves. You're 81, and you seem to have twice the energy
81,
I've ever had.
And here's a rat, 81 and still having fun, you know?
Yes, mate. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And you know what? Our podcast is very much, we try and talk about what it's like to be a fan and to be obsessed by music. And if ever we've chose the right guest, it's definitely you today, because everything you've said from your very earliest sort of memories of growing up around chess, right up to now, you know, at 81, you've still got that fire burning in you. And that, for me, is just wonderful to hear, Marshall.
Yeah, and it's great that you're doing what you're doing, and you know you're part of the guys like you are what keeps me going. You know, because I need the outlets, man. I need the promo.
Well, listen,
I'm a record man. You know?
You are indeed. I could quite happily talk to you for another hour or two, I'm sure. What a lovely conversation, and I wish
Lovely,
you the
Eamon.
very best with the New Moves album. I mean,
And I can't wait to hear all my friends in the UK. When is this running?
so this will come out probably not next month, it'll be the month after, because we do a monthly show.
When you drop me your address, drop me. Okay, remember to drop me a line so I could have all my UK friends listen in.
I will do, and I'll tell you when it's going to be published as well, just like a couple of days before.
After you check out this comic book, drop me a line. I'm curious.
Oh, mate, I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, you're gonna get.
Marshall,
All right, Eamon.
I feel genuinely uplifted. That was a really lovely conversation.
I do too. No, I do too, man. I'm sitting there with a big smile. It's 7 a.m.
Beautiful.
And I haven't even had my coffee yet. So there you go.
Go and have your cup of coffee, and thank you so much for talking to What Goes Around
All
today.
right, Eamon. Good. Nice to talk to you.
You're a star.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, Marshall.
My baby long and tall, shaped like a cannonball. And every time she loved me, oh, I can hear me squall, crying. I believe I changed my mind. She said, I'm so glad I'm living. Baby, I'm so glad you're mine.
Hey, thank you so much for listening today. We really appreciate it. And of course, this is the point in the podcast where we say something like, hey, like, subscribe, come on. Now, we try and do this in a gentle fashion. We don't shout like and subscribe and hammer you with it all day long. But it is important to the podcast. So if you could just do those things, maybe write a review, or just recommend us to someone, that would mean the world to us, because we do this for the love and for your good ears. So thank you for doing the listening.
All night I cried.